Hello. So thanks for coming. So this is our panel session. We're going to start with a sponsored talk here by Shrishti from Nuclera.
Hi, thank you. Welcome on this Monday afternoon, and I hope you're caffeinated. We are at booth 216. I am the field application scientist at Nuclera, and we're an instrumentation-based company that does protein synthesis. And today I'm just going to walk you through one of our workflows. It's the membrane workflow. And most people, and all of you in the room especially, from genes to proteins to actually getting the proteins in hand, is always the first hurdle. And just going through each of that process of cloning, deciding the expression host, deciding how much liter of protein expression do you do in cell culture, for membrane proteins especially, detergent solubilization and optimizing those conditions, going through the affinity purification, going through the sec, and then actually getting protein in hand is a very tedious process and it's traditionally an iterative process that takes weeks to months sometimes to get that protein. And most of these membrane proteins usually fail to express or purify under those conditions. So we came up with a technology that basically utilizes automated multiplex screening to be able to get you that information really quickly in a data-generated format so that you have the DNA input, and then the output is basically an expression and purification yield. And this is especially helpful for challenging proteins like membrane proteins. Our technology is based on 4 pillars. It is the cell-free protein synthesis, so we've kind of bypassed the cellular constraints of just cell culture in general, volumes, all of that, plus the toxicity that goes in with depending on what proteins you're trying to express. And digital microfluidics is the second kind of pillar, which is basically using nanoliter droplets in a very precise manner to be able to express and screen customizable conditions to optimize your screening results. And the way we do that is actually utilizing a split GFP tag on the C terminus of our DNA constructs so that you have a fluorescence readout as the output of the assay for expression and the purification. And this, is the output is basically your input is DNA, your output is data, which is, really important in this AI space where you're trying to design different variants, different constructs, and how do you actually get that to be structural and functional. So the process is basically designing the DNA with these different variants, expressing and purifying them really quickly within 24 hours, and then scaling that recipe that comes out of that screen on the benchtop in an Eppendorf tube to be able to use it as assay-ready protein for any biophysical characterization that you need to do within the next 24 hours. So within 48 hours, you go from DNA to protein to be put into assays. And the way you design these on our system is basically for the membrane workflow, we have 11 different spots that you can put these constructs in, and it can go in as a linear construct or a circular e-gene construct. The circular e-gene constructs, most people prefer if they are going to then translate it into in vivo cell culture. But the construct design is basically the C terminus that is tagged with this detector tag and a strep tag for the affinity purification. And the 11 different constructs can be completely different proteins or the same protein in the variations of domain deletions, truncations, site-directed mutations, isologs, isoforms, homologs, all of those. Once you have that as one input, the second input is basically the cell-free blend preparation. And for membrane proteins, what we've noticed instead of the detergent solubilization, where you're kind of solubilizing the membrane, getting that protein out, and then trying to refold it into nanodiscs, the way we do it is actually screening for those nanodiscs with MSP sizes and lipid compositions. And you can really customize this aspect on the cartridge. So the cell-free blend really is the transcription translational machinery from E. coli that goes into this Eppendorf tube or mixture, and then any of these different MSP sizes or lipid compositions as your nanodisc screen. And we have actually an additive adding slot as well, where if you know your protein of interest has disulfide bonds, then you add the glutathione. If you know it needs metal cofactors, ion cofactors, chaperones, any of that, it's definitely customizable. So that's where you can multiplex 11 different constructs with those 8 different conditions to get 88 different data points for each of those expression conditions and purification conditions. And then this is when you put it in the instrument on a cartridge and you pipette and forget. Overnight, it runs the reaction, and by the end of the day, or like the next day, you basically get this droplet movement formation from the digital microfluidics to get a visualization report of your expression and purification workflows. And the expression yield is basically a lollipop chart or a heat map that tells you how much yield you have for each of those constructs, and then the purification efficiency of how much expression to purification yield did you actually get towards the end. And the third chart is basically the scale up. So anything that is potentially a high yield, that's what you can scale up in a very linear fashion. So then the next day, you come in, you look at that data, and you pick that best recipe to then go into the same expression purification recipe in that Eppendorf tube the next day, and do the purification process the exact same way. And it's a very linear reaction scale, because that's what you're inputting in. And it is the reagent, your additives, the nanodisc that worked, and you get microgram to milligram scale of assay-ready protein. I'm just going to go through a quick case study for MSBA, which is an ABC transporter family, which we kind of got through this screening for structural and functional studies, where using nanodisc incorporation. So the first panel, basically, this was in collaboration with Imperial College of London and Nuclera. And we incorporated these membrane scaffold proteins as 3 different sizes of MSPD1 DH5, MSPE3D1, which is, again, a slightly bigger size to incorporate some of these transporters, and MSP2N2, which is the largest size of the MSP scaffold. And we tried 2 different phospholipids and a detergent as like the traditional approach, and the control condition was just buffer. And what we saw was these nanodiscs actually helped in the folding and increased the yield for MSBA. And the thought process and the rationale behind that was basically when you're doing detergents and solubilizing that protein, you're kind of breaking up using those harsh conditions to break up the membrane and then trying to refold the protein into these nanodiscs. But on the system and in cell-free protein synthesis, you're basically using the nanodiscs to kind of guide that synthesis. So as the protein is getting synthesized, it's getting folded properly into these nanodiscs. When we did the scale-up after the screening, we found a couple of nanodiscs that actually worked with the DMPG, and within 24 hours, we had highly pure MSBA that looked really nicely on the gel, and we could concentrate it up and use it in structural and functional studies, where in the activity assay, when you stimulate it with lipid A, we got that stimulation, and then when you added the inhibitor, we got an inhibition of MSBA. So we kind of, reconfirmed and reassessed that the MSBA was active, and based on negative stain data, we also got some structural information out of MSBA that we saw that movement of the transporter. That's all from me. I do have multiple case studies and workflows, but we are at booth 216, so please come visit us if any of you are having a hard time expressing these proteins. Thank you for having me here.
So thank you for everyone for spending the next hour or so with us. So the title of this panel is How AI Can Be Used to Improve Core and Platform Operations. So I just wanted to take you through the panel lineup here. So thanks to Nuclera first. Our first panelist is going to be Sean Schaffer from Vanderbilt, presenting his talk on automating data management with AI, streamlining workflows in a core facility. Melissa Mann from St. Jude's will then talk about leveraging AI for impactful communication. And finally, this guy here is going to talk about local LLM chatbots as controlled force multipliers. So I just wanted to give a couple of words about the panel. So first, everyone sees AI and starts thinking different things. So I just want to make it clear what we're not going to cover here. So we're not going to talk about AI and its use in scientific data collection or analysis. That's been covered a million times and just many, many other panels on that. We're not going to talk about the issues with data centers and global warming, even though that's obviously a problem. Will AI take my job? We might talk about that. What happens when an AGI becomes sentient? That's a whole different problem. But what we will be covering is how the three of us are using AI tech in our everyday lives to make our business skills more efficient and our lives easier. And these are going to include tasks including writing, sample processing, and user help. I'm going to turn it over to Sean, but we're going to try to save questions to the end so we can answer as a panel. So, thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Put this up here. All right, good afternoon. Welcome, thank you for being here. I know you have choices of where you could be this afternoon or right now, so I'm glad you guys showed up here. I'm very excited about this topic of AI. I'm also very nervous, okay? I've never presented like this before. I'm just gonna tell you that right off the bat that I'm here, I'm excited to do this, so I'm gonna get past that, and we're gonna get to the end of this, because I really want to present this to you. So, tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Sean Schaffer. I'm a research specialist senior in the Cell Imaging Shared Resource at Vanderbilt University. I've been there for 23 years. I wear a lot of different hats under that umbrella, so a lot of different things that I do. And what I want to talk to you about today is automating a data management with AI. Basically, I streamlined a workflow that we had using AI, using some automation tools, and then using some LLMs. So, as you mentioned, I will touch this just very, very briefly. So anytime the topic of AI comes up, inevitably, if it's in a work environment, you're going to say, well, is AI going to take my job? I'm a little worried. I hear about it. Am I going to have a job when I go in tomorrow? Well, I can tell you confidently at this point that where AI stands today, it's not going to take your job, okay? AI is just a tool. It's a very powerful tool, right? But it's just a tool. So AI will not take your job. However, come on. Someone who uses AI might, right? So it is a tool, and if you're not using that tool and somebody else is, it's going to make them more efficient. It's going to make them possibly a better employee because they're going to be able to get more done in less time. So the question isn't, should I use AI? It's, how do I use AI? How do I adopt AI? And that's what I'm going to take you through an example today. So the first thing you need to do is identify a problem, right? So find something that you do that you could think, well, what can AI do for me? Well, what I found is we had a manual process of getting EM data. So I forgot to mention, we're a light microscopy facility. So we have an EM facility. And so they take samples in. And so we have a process that works with 3 different platforms to get that sample to intake it and then to get it through the process. And basically, the first thing that happens is it comes into iLab, we get that request. I have to take some data from iLab. I have to copy it into a master spreadsheet. So this was kind of all set up previously. Copied into a master spreadsheet. And then I have to open up another Excel spreadsheet that's in from iLab, copy some things back and forth between those two. And then ultimately, that data has to be uploaded to our LIMS system that we built. It's a web-based LIMS system, so it uses a database to do that, and it uses a web server. So you can see there's a lot of back and forth between these 3, and it's all done manually. So the original process had 20 steps to process one single sample. And so you can imagine there's a lot of things that have to be done manually. I made a quick video because if I tried to do this live, it would crash, I am sure. So here's the video. So what's happening now is this is iLab. We've opened the requisition on the request. It's copying some information. It's opening up the Excel spreadsheet. This is 2 times speed, by the way. Pasting it in there, copying some more information, pasting it in here, opening up the other Excel spreadsheet that only exists in iLab. And then I'm going to copy and paste some information back. And all this I'm doing manually and putting some more information. If you could, in just a second, pause the video for a second. So right here, if they can pause it, there we go. That sample ID that's being put in right now, that number is very specific to something that we do in EM. It tracks every sample that we do. That number can only exist outside of iLab. There's no way to generate it in iLab. So I have to generate it outside of iLab and then bring it back into iLab. And so, unfortunately, I've got to put it here and then copy it back. So you can play the video. So there I'm making it, pasting it back into the other Excel spreadsheet. And now this data needs to be uploaded to the database. And so inside of Excel is something called MySQL for Excel. And it's a little program that runs, but it's still fairly manual, but it's going to take that data and it's going to upload it to the database. It's going to take a second here. It's done. And now we got to go back to iLab and upload that. And yes, it's tedious. Check that it's done. It's there. You'll see just for a brief second that sample ID number is there. That's what I was checked for. And now it's done. So you can see it took 2 minutes and 16 seconds of real time to process that. It's tedious. I wanted it to be tedious. I want you to feel that it was tedious because that's how I felt. So what I said is we can automate this. There's got to be a way to do this. And so here's the 5 things that I kind of used AI for and some automation tools. The first thing is browser automation. So all of those clicks, all of the capturing, copying and pasting for the browser, that can all be done with automation. All of the copying back and forth between the Excels, definitely we can do that with a VBA macro. Uploading all of that data to the database, that can be also done with some scripting. And then what I wanted to happen is I wanted to have just a single executable script, something I could double click, run that automation, and I don't have to touch anything. And the final thing I used AI for was to improve the website. I'd built the website, but this AI helped me kind of streamline it, make it more efficient, and make it more functional. So after I used AI to do the automation and everything else, I went from 20 plus steps to 1 to 2. And one of those steps being double clicking the file to start the process. So you can see that's a pretty big improvement. And I'm going to play this video. It is also twice speed, but it's less time. So literally opening up the file there, that opens up the automation process, and it's literally just going through step by step all the things that I did previously, I just automated. And the thing to take notice of here is other than double clicking, I'm not doing anything right now. That's all happening on its own. You just watch it go, and it will take less time. It's doing the same thing. It's opened up the Excel spreadsheet. It's already done. It already uploaded the information. It goes back to iLab, has to re-upload that. There's no way around that. And then it processes that real quickly and re-uploads it. There it goes, checks it, and it's done. You can see it's 108, so that's real time. So I've cut that in half. That processing time has gone in half. So these are the realized gains from using AI. I went from 20 steps to 1 to 2. I increased the processing time by 50%, which I showed you. But the biggest thing that happened is you took me out of the mix, okay? I'm there, I'm the problem. I'm the human error in there. So doing 20 plus steps manually, you can imagine there's a lot of places there where things could go wrong, and it's gonna be because of me. So you took me out of that. I still, had the automation doing the work, but you took me out of it. So that reduced human error is basically almost down to 0. And then the last thing is it's scalable. So you can imagine, right now, I'm the only one that does this process for the core. So if I get hit by a bus, nobody's gonna know what to do. It's gonna be very hard for them to do all those manual steps. So this makes it a lot easier to be scalable to other staff. They can just double click that file, they can just run it, and they'll get to the end without too much problem. So what did I use to do this? That's kind of what people always wanna know. How do you go about this? So what I did is for all the automation, I just used something called RPA tools, which are just robotic process automation. Now this technically, you would not call this AI, right? Automation has been around for years. But I did use some AI to help me with some of these processes just to make them a little faster and easier. So anyway, the one I used was UI.vision. That's just a browser-based RPA, but Power Automate is one from Microsoft, which I highly recommend. I actually started out using that, but I ran into a problem where I would have had to pay for the next level up to get past it, and I didn't want to do that, so I just went to UI.vision to use that. And then UiPath is another one. If you just want to Google RPA, you'll come up with a million of them. They all operate very similar to each other, so one being better than another, it's just kind of your comfort level. Anyway, so I used this for automating all of the web-based clicks, all the copy and pasting, all that stuff was done with the RPA. So this is just a quick screenshot of what it shows. So on the left is just step by step. This is doing exactly what I did manually. It's copying, it's pasting, it's opening the browser, it's opening up Excel spreadsheets. All that I'm just telling it what to do, and it just does it in order. On the right, so there's some processes that don't lend themselves well to just saying do this. I have to open up that second Excel spreadsheet. There's no way around that to get it back into iLab. And the problem is that spreadsheet never has the same name. So I can't just tell it, open up this spreadsheet. So what I've done is you can see, what it does, it uses visual information to capture and looks and says, okay, you see this today where it says today? Below that, with that little Excel symbol, that's always where the file shows up. So if you know to look for that every time, just open that file, and that's how I use that. And then, of course, I also used LLMs for all the coding aspects of this. So I used ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. I prefer Claude for coding. They all obviously will accomplish the task pretty well. Claude just seems to be a little bit better. But I use this for anything that involves code. So all the HTML, PHP, and all those Excel macros, and then inside of the actual SQL database, I use that just to write a little script to do some things as well. So some of you might want to try this, right? That's the whole point of this, is to not be afraid of it and just say, yeah, maybe I could automate something. So if you want to get started on this, there's a couple of things you kind of have to know or get going here. And that's the first thing is, you're probably going to need a code editor. At some point, you're going to run into some code. It may be very basic code, but you're still going to want it. It's always a good idea. It helps you learn. You can see the code. You can kind of get a feel for it and get over the mystery. It's not that crazy. So Visual Studio Code is a great one. Just download that. It's a very popular one. It's got a lot of modules in it that are very useful. And then you're going to need some sort of server. Anytime you're running a database, even if it's just for the data and you're not actually going to put it up on a website, you're going to want a database. Well, XAMPP is a great one because you can put it on your local computer, and you can just run it from your local computer. Get used to using it on your local computer, and then if you find, yeah, this is working for me, then talk to your IT staff and get it put up into the cloud, get it on a virtual machine, so it's not on your computer anymore, but you can cut your teeth on your local computer and just feel better because it's right there with you. And then to learn the basics, video tutorials. That's how I learned a lot of this. I just watch video tutorials, and you can, just do some Googling and you'll find some good ones. The problem with video tutorials is you might have a 20-minute video, but there's about 30 seconds of that video that you actually need, but you got to watch the whole 20 minutes. And this is what I ran into, back in the day. This is all I had. And so I would just spend a lot of time that I didn't need just getting the information I wanted. So number 4 is the key. Ask an LLM. That's why they're there. That's the beauty of these things. They cut to the chase, right? They don't have to watch the 20, or they've already watched the 20-minute video. They've synthesized it. They'll give you the 30 seconds you need. So honestly, from here on out, that's basically what I do all the time is I just go right to the LLM. And in fact, in preparing for this talk, I said, I'm going to be talking to a group of people. There may be some people in the audience who've never used it. They're scared to use it. They don't know what to do. So what I did is I used a little trick. Anytime you talk to an LLM, let the LLM do the work for you in terms of the prompt. I said, I'm going to be talking to a group. They don't really have maybe a lot of understanding of how this works. Give me a prompt for how to explain to them how to do this that I can feed back into you, and then you give me that response. Because the LLM is going to come up with a much better prompt than you probably will on your own, and then it just spit it out. And I ran this, I put it into Claude, and it spit it out, and I read through it and went, that's better than anything I could have ever come up with. So you can screenshot that. It's in the slides, so it'll be there, but that's what I did. All right, so kind of the bottom line, the take home here in terms of what this means for you. As you can see, small automations, so just little things at a time, have real impact, and the momentum builds fast. You may start with something that has 3 or 4 steps in it, and you get that done, you're like, oh, that's really cool, and you look around and say, oh, I can automate that too, and I can automate that. And so it'll snowball on you once you start to do this. But it requires a shift in mindset, right? If you're coming into this saying, I don't know how to use AI, I'm not really sure about that, stop that and just think, oh, I can automate a workflow. That's one thing I can do with this. I can have it do that for me and relieve some of the, the day-to-day stuff that you don't really like doing. The practical reality is these days, honestly, for a lot of this stuff, you don't need formal training, right? You don't need a software team, and you don't need months of development anymore. What you do need, however, is curiosity, iteration, and a willingness to try, and what I would also say is a willingness to fail, because things won't work, right? They won't work right. You just have to keep trying and keep trying. So your next step, so if you want to do something like this, my advice is here's what you do. Go back to your lab, go back to the core and say, what's one repetitive task that somebody does, usually involving a computer, that I could automate? And then ask the LLM how to automate that. Tell them, hey, I'm doing this, I work with this program, I'm clicking these buttons, I'm doing this. And then again, ask the LLM, this is what I do, give me the prompt that I can give back to you, and it'll spit that out for you. And then try it, even if it's messy. I guarantee you, This is amazing for me. When I first tried it, I was building a website. I said, hey, let's just see what the LLM does. I put it in there. It built the website. I was awestruck. I'm like, all I did was tell it to build this website. It did it. It worked the first time. It was not what I wanted, but it built it, right? And then you just iterate on that, and eventually you get to the point where it actually does what you want, and it's amazing. And that's exactly how this project started, right? That's exactly what I did. I just said, oh, let's just try this, let's automate this, let's put that in there, and boom, eventually I got to this. And now I can tell you right now, I'm actually, 5 steps past what you're seeing today. I've got it to the point now where I'm using the API to call everything in, and I've actually been able to get rid of the Excel spreadsheet, and it just calls the information in there, loads it up to the database. I do still have to interact with iLab, so I do still have to deal with that one Excel spreadsheet to get that information back in there because it's not part of the API. But I've reduced it down to about 15 seconds now, so much, much better. All right, so that's an end of that. I want to do a quick thank you to Jim Chambers for being the panel moderator and putting this group together, inviting me. I want to thank my managing director, Jenny Schaffer, for encouraging me to come up with AI solutions to improve our core efficiency. Without her encouragement, I wouldn't be able to do any of this, and so I thank her a lot. ABRF, this is a great organization. First time I've been here, but I know the work that you do, and I think it's great. I love cores and everything about them. And then my fellow speaker, Melissa Mann, who's up next, I want to thank her for being here. And there's my information. I'm happy to talk about anything AI all the time. There's a lot more to talk about, clearly. This is just kind of the beginning of it. And just at the bottom there, just remember that AI didn't replace the work, right? It makes work for better space for better work. So thank you.
So thank you, Sean and James. So I'm here to talk to you about, I feel like it's a basic thing, but everybody tells me you're going to be really interested in this, so I hope so. I've been at St. Jude for 25 years now, and I've been in my current role as a research program manager for shared resources for 3 years. And I'm going to talk to you about how I use AI just about every day, either in survey design, data analysis, or messaging to different stakeholders at St. Jude. And I use it as a partner. It's definitely not a replacement, but it helps you take mountains of data and turn them into actionable items that for your shared resource directors or your administration to use. And I also use it to tailor message to the different stakeholders. So the important thing, which Sean talked about, is building a really good prompt. And you want to start with, it has 4 elements: a role, a task, context, and constraints. And I personally find, I love that your prompt that you showed is exactly in this order, because my brain wants to think role and then context, but if you put the task right after the role, everything turns out a lot better. And so you want to treat AI when you're talking to it, when you're creating a prompt for it, like somebody who's really novice but picks up on things really well. So give it all the detail that you can and make sure you set constraints. So the first example I'm gonna walk through happened just like 3 weeks ago. One of my directors came up and said that she was having a challenge. She had a few people in her group of about 20 that felt like the environment in their lab was a little noisy, they couldn't focus. But this is a group of people who are really friendly, they have a great camaraderie, and she did not want to implement anything without a lot of input from them. And she didn't even want the questions to feel like a top-down. She wanted it to feel like just a conversation. So I used AI. I set up a prompt. I told it who I am, research program manager. I told it I needed a 5-question survey, and I gave them the context that this is for a group. They have a great atmosphere. They're having trouble focusing. They already have some focus hours, but do they need more? How can we go about creating this survey? And then I told it to keep the tone informal. So here's the exact prompt I used. I don't know if I should read it out because I kind of just did. But you give it a lot of detail, and you also tell it 5 questions. It will give you AI will give you too much information, is my experience, if you don't really set good constraints for it. So I'll move on to on the right panel, now it's not important that you see what it put out, but this is the actual output, everything there in black on the right-hand side. And after I read through it, I thought, oh, I want to add a question, and I want to add an open format. So it took me about 20 seconds to write that prompt, and I would have spent at least 20 minutes overthinking every single question for this survey if I had not, if I hadn't just given it to AI. So I also could use this to change the tone, change the, the context of the survey. You can just really quickly make modifications, and you can, of course, like I did there in red, review and add questions as needed. So the next thing I'm going to talk about, in addition to this really small survey, I also send out our annual survey for all shared resources. We have 20 at St. Jude, and we always have open-ended requests for comments, and those can be really hard to categorize and to come up with, like, what are we supposed to do with all of this information, right? You want people to be able to put, of course we have, multiple choice, but you want people to be able to put their input in it, but you also need to be able to, without spending weeks and weeks of time, go through those comments and come up with, categorize them into, are they a comment of appreciation or a comment of concern? So put them into those themes. And then you want to come up with topics under those and a description of those topics so that you can present to leadership, so the directors can present to their teams and say, hey, it looks like there's these 10 people that are having this problem. And so I created this prompt, which is a little bit, oh, sorry, I forgot to have this in there. So you want to be able to cluster those under the themes and the topics. And you have to ask the AI to map those comments back to what the theme and the topic, because it does not get this right. This, in my experience, at least 10 to 30% of the time, depending on how complicated that person's comment was, it cannot understand if someone has both appreciation and concern, if someone's comment, you can read the nuance in the comment and see that they're not actually happy, but they're trying to sound nice in their comment. So humans can read that nuance, but AI can't. But it can do 80% of the work. It can come up with the theme and the topic, and it can give you a suggestion for that comment. So here's the prompt I used for that, which is more complicated, a lot more like Sean's. So again, you give it the context of who you are, and I use Excel spreadsheet with the comments in them, and I wanted to identify the topics, and I give it what I want to call them. Like, I want it to be under this theme, appreciation or concern, and I wanted to find common topics up to 5, because it will give you 20. And I want, for me, to make my life easier, I wanted to put in a table that I can copy and put into PowerPoint. And I need it to map every single topic, every single comment back to one of those topics and themes. And then I read through them and make sure that it called it right. And I always have to make changes. So, and for us, it's very important that we don't have any personally identifiable information in those comments, because our surveys are anonymous. Sometimes people throw information in that you didn't want to broadcast to everyone. You can also ask the AI to give you, to identify quotes that best illustrate the themes. So when I present to our senior leadership, if I want a really high level, these were the most comments that had like the most similar theme. So I could present that one slide for them that sort of encompassed all 20 shared resources. So this is more about the messaging. So once you create that survey, you want to send out results. And I'll step back to the first survey I created. So maybe in that we find that we're going to need to add another day with an hour of focus time. And we need to let leadership know that this is what the survey gave us. We also want to let the team members know that we heard their feedback. And this is the step we're going to try out for a while. And we need to let those end users know, hey, there's a couple of hours during the week that maybe if you could hold off coming to the lab and asking questions, like it would help us. But of course, we're service, so you can come if it's an emergency, but if you can wait an hour, it helps our team if they can spend a little extra time in deep focus. So instead of trying to come up with an email for all three of these scenarios, I can put into AI, remember that survey we created, and it does remember it, and now I want to report this out to these three audiences. Can you suggest some emails? And I've had really great luck with it spitting back a good message. Maybe I have to change it a little bit, modify it so that it sounds like it's more from me, because people are going to respond to an email, they get to know you and they get to know your tone. So, and also AI gets to know your tone if you use it enough. So this is my last slide. And I wanted to address a few things because I have two teenagers who would be really upset if I didn't talk about cognitive atrophy and environmental responsibility. Use AI as an accelerator, but not the author. In all the scenarios we've given up here, it's not going to create everything for you. It needs a human component. It needs to understand what it's going to do. And I don't really see the cognitive atrophy that people are talking about in the news in the way that I'm using AI at all. It just saves me a lot of time and lets me focus on things that are higher level thinking. There's a lot of nuance that AI does not understand, so you really do have to check it and make sure it hasn't made up something that you did not intend, or that in the example of the survey comments, the commenter did not mean. So always verify that. And the more intentional you are as you learn to use it, the more intentional you are with the prompts, the faster it works, the less processing that's required. So that helps there a little bit to be environmentally responsible. Working in a hospital, privacy is very important. So when I'm using, depending on what you're using it for, if it's just a regular email, there are no real names involved, there's nothing like privacy-wise important, you can use OpenAI sources, but I use an AI that our institution pays for any of the things that might have any sensitive information at all. So just be really mindful and careful of that. And then I think we're holding questions for the end. But in addition to thanking my fellow panelists, I want to thank all our shared resources at St. Jude, because without them, I wouldn't have a place. And I hope that my use of AI is serving them well. So.
Okay, I guess it's my turn now. So I'm going to talk about chatbots, and I know a lot of people have already seen me on Zoom or other venues talk about chatbots, so it's going to be a little repetitive of that, but I'm going to add some new stuff at the 3 slides in, so don't worry. Okay, so about 11 years ago, I started the job as light microscopy director at UMass Amherst. When I showed up, it was an empty room, and 42 pallets of microscopes showed up, and it was just me. And about 6 years later, those microscopes were functional, but it was still just me. So, and I know a lot of people here have had similar experiences where it's just you, and you're the center point for every question and every problem that happens with your many, many users. So about that time, I started getting a little frustrated, like people are asking me the same question over and over again, and sometimes it's even the same people asking the same question. I know you've all experienced it. So there was basically lots of cutting and pasting from old emails that I had where I typed out an exact protocol for fixing this problem and stuff like that. I would add, I would solve these problems ahead of time in trainings, but it became very clear that our 1-hour training or 2-hour trainings, whatever we were doing at the time, was clearly not enough. The users were getting saturated with information, no pun intended. So here's just one example of a very common question. If anyone has a Nikon TIE microscope, this is a classic question. It's like once a week at least. So basically the microscope is stuck at 500 microns. I can't move the objective up or down. I think it's broken. I'm so sorry, Jim. So, and here I say 1 second, that's basically me on my phone. And then the next phrase is me cutting and pasting from a document that I just have open on my desktop. Here's another one. Jim, are you around? The crest is showing this error. It's anyone who knows, it's clear that the user turned the instruments on in the wrong order and the driver didn't get loaded. So same thing, right? We've all seen this or some variation of this. So I tried, an FAQ on the website. I tried it as a pop-up window on every computer. I would track analytics, like who's actually looking at this, interacting with it, and the answer was basically 0. So that doesn't work. So then I started this quick text document on my desktop, and basically I realized I have become a copy-paste robot. This is all before Power Apps and stuff like that, but alas, it was me cutting and pasting to help people. So then I started thinking, okay, I need to look at a chatbot. So I did some Googling and looked at Reddit threads. I discovered natural language understanding. So this is pre-AI. This was around 2020. And I implemented this, and it worked pretty well because it was very constrained to my knowledge base that I kind of taught it, basically, phrases to look for. And then AI, LLMs came online. There was an open source one that made some use of this called BotPress, and I switched over to that, and it was great. Then it kind of got a little wonky because the LLMs kept changing so quickly and kind of in an uncontrolled fashion that the responses became unpredictable. So I kind of dropped it for a little bit, but now I'm back to it. I'm using a local LLM, and I'll talk about that next. But first, here's the dream, me sitting on a beach. This is AI generated, by the way, it's not me. So imagine basically never getting messages off hours. Imagine even when you're off in your office, being able to focus on grant writing or strategic planning, big topics that are bigger than solving the 500 micron stuck microscope. So as a single person facility leveraging this technology can really open up your brain power for other bigger things to solve. And that's where it comes to a well-designed chatbot. So what I'm using now is called a local RAG chatbot, and RAG is a retrieval augmented generation. So why am I using this? What are the benefits? So when I say local, it's really local. Like it's not going out to the internet at all. Everything is on a local computer. So what that means is that conversations and any data that's exchanged doesn't leave my facility. There's no surprise bills because I can turn it off or turn it on, and it's just using the electricity from the university, so it's free. I own the server, I host my site, so yeah, no cost increases ever. It's available 24/7, so there's never downtime for questions. This was particularly important to me. I wanted it to be easy to update. So if I learn that it's not answering things correctly or if it doesn't know the answers, I want an easy way to interact with it and kind of retrain it or give it some more knowledge. It's using freely available LLMs. These are open source models, and it's scalable. So again, I'm sure people who have used Claude or a bunch of the LLMs, you eventually hit a point where you're like, oh, I have to start paying now, and I didn't want to do that. So okay, so beyond just solving problems, so what else can it do? Well, so obviously it can do immediate response time. So even if I'm in a meeting or my staff is not around, it's going to answer the question right away if it knows it. So there's no delay, really. We're going to go into prompt engineering a little bit, but the tone is matched to how I want it to sound, and it's context aware, so it's only using the right knowledge base. And language support, this is something I've not implemented yet, but the idea here is that even though this chatbot has been trained in English, it knows translation. So if a user begins typing in their native language, asking it questions, it should be able to switch and speak to the user in their own language. And then some future uses of this. So personalized learning experiences. So if we take a new staff member in and they want to learn the ins and outs of a microscope, I can sit down and talk through it, but if they have the knowledge base that I've developed for that microscope, that's kind of just a first pass of here's the pitfalls or the common issues that come up. Using it in training and onboarding of users. Again, I've heard the term getting hit by a bus like 4 times today. So, if I get hit by a bus, all that knowledge is gone. So the chatbot will retain a little bit of it at least. So, the facility won't completely fail. And this last one I like a lot. If the chatbot gets used a lot, and I see a similar question being asked all the time, that we can actually use that for some predictive, it can predict some issues coming along that, maybe a filter turret is about to fail. So get service in and take care of that filter turret. So what does it actually look like? So let's pretend I have a user who comes in on a Sunday evening to do a really, important experiment that they need the data by Monday. So the user sits down at the microscope. They have an issue. Maybe it's the 500 micron issue, right? And they're stuck. But luckily there's the chatbot right in front of them. So they can ask the chatbot the question, how do I unstick the microscope? This kicks off a process where that request goes to a server that lives in my office. And basically the back end of the chatbot accepts the request. It parses the knowledge base that I've given it. It comes up with 5 potential answers and ranks them. And it then kind of synthesizes it into a meaningful response to the person's question. So it sends the response back. The user is happy. They can continue their session. I don't have to deal with a canceled, 6-hour session which loses revenue, and I have a user that's now unhappy. They can go back to their experiment and they're happy. And I'm happy, so everyone's happy. So what else does it do, though? It also stores the conversation. So, and there is a disclaimer, so here's the actual chatbot, what it looks like. And it's the same thing, when you call, I don't know, any company, right? All conversations are recorded for training purposes. So this is my equivalent of that. So we record everything, and we use it to update the chatbot. It also randomly asks how it did, with a quick thumbs up, thumbs down icon. So this is similar to what you've both said, so I'm going to blow through this pretty quick. So this is basically the prompt engineering, and I'll just show you the prompt that we actually use. So you're a helpful assistant in the facility. Your goal is to answer the user's question using only the context provided in the knowledge base. That's the key thing. So try not to use your internal knowledge or training data, because the way these are trained, they know a lot of things, but we don't want it to use that. We just want it to use what we've given it. So if the answer is not explicitly contained in the context, say, I'm sorry, I can't find the information right now, I'll let the LMF staff know so I can answer it next time. And then don't hallucinate or make up facts. So again, that's a key thing, because if you don't tell it this, it might just try to answer it because it wants to provide a good answer to the question, and sometimes that answer can be wrong or from a different microscope, which is not very good. So one of the other constraints we keep on it is called the temperature. We keep the temperature very low, and the temperature is kind of a measure of how creative the bot can be. So our bot is essentially not creative at all. It essentially spits back exactly what came out of the knowledge base, which is exactly really what I want it to do, because I want it to be like it's talking to me, and here's what I would say. Okay, so I know some people here are thinking, this sounds amazing, I would love to do this, and that's great. And you totally can. It's really not that hard if you have some help from IT or like Sean was saying, use the other chatbots to help you set up a server. It can be done easily with an old computer that is not doing anything anymore. You can put on Linux and whatnot. I use a WordPress site with a plugin, and I have a domain name for it, and it just sits there and it's on all the time. It's great. You can also use a service like BotPress, and there's a million of them now, and just get a URL, and that's totally fine. So when I've given a talk similar to this before, there's a very predictable pattern. Right after, I get a bunch of people that are like, this is great, give me some more details, and I always do, and it's always great. And then very often, I hear from them a month or two later, and I say, how's it going? And it's almost always, IT wouldn't let me do this, or I didn't have time for it, or I got stuck on this step. And I always feel bad. So I told this to a student I had working with me as a programmer, And we came up with an idea to just do it, we're gonna do it for you, basically. So we have this website, corebotmaker.dev. Hopefully you all don't go to it right now because I don't know if it's gonna survive that many clicks, but at some point, check it out. It's really nothing fancy. It's basically a server that you can upload your question and answer pairs in a specific format, and there's a little tutorial up there on what format it should be in, or you can just type it if you want to just test it out. And the way this works, you put that in, you register so we know who's doing it. Once it's done processing in a day or two, whenever my student gets around to it, he'll send you a URL, and that URL is going to point to the bot on another server that's right next door to this one, and that's your bot now. So you'll have a custom chatbot that you can then, make a QR code, print it out, stick it next to your microscope or your mass spec, and it's going to be customized to exactly what you want it to answer. So that's that. So then I started thinking a little more about this, and again, to microscopy world, so I've already talked about the TIE microscope, right, with the common problem of getting stuck at 500 because someone pressed escape. Now, there's other things that are very relevant to the TIE, but only TIE. I also have TI2 microscopes, and they have their own questions that are, and common pitfalls that users fall into. And I have certain cameras that have, the similar thing. So basically, all of these parts of a microscope, they can, if you think about it, they all have their own little group of knowledge that is associated with them. This camera has this knowledge base, this microscope body has this base, maybe this confocal scan head has this base, this knowledge base, and then maybe the software has this knowledge base. So I got to thinking that this would be a really good chance to kind of do a Wikipedia type style for knowledge-based building, because in this room, anyone here has an equipment-heavy core, I guarantee you know things. Your knowledge of the camera or the mass spec in your facility is unique, but I bet it overlaps a little bit with your neighbor, the state over from you. So wouldn't it be cool if we could kind of get together in a Wikipedia kind of environment and share this knowledge into kind of a distributable quantal knowledge base based on every little piece of equipment. I feel like I'm selling you guys something. I'm not. So we've started this. It's not quite ready yet. And so far we're just doing microscope parts, microscope stands, and software. But the idea here is that you can go on this website, which I'm not going to tell you what it is yet, and you can interact with the knowledge base that's there. You can add knowledge to it. You can say this one's wrong. This is all going to be reviewed by humans. So we'll make sure that it's legit. So some other bot is not filling in things about something else. Anyway, so I'm looking for volunteers if anyone's interested in this project, whether it's for mass spec or some other technology. I'd love to chat and see if you can help out with this somehow. And that's my last slide. So the other thing that I've noticed after talks like this is people go home and try things, and then they have questions. So we've put together, hopefully this date's still okay with you guys? Yeah, good. So we're gonna have a Zoom office hours where you just drop in, April 28th, 11 to noon Eastern. So try some of the stuff we've talked about at home or in your lab, maybe. And if you're stuck, or if you make great progress, or if you learn things, we'd love to talk to you again in about a month. And if we have a lot of people, we'll break out into Zoom rooms and whatnot. So, all right, that's my talk. And now we're gonna be available for lots of questions or suggestions and other things. So thank you all. Any questions?
Can you hear me? Yes. My university has a localized AI that's built to be protected resource, like you've mentioned with the hospital system. Do you think that that's trainable to serve as a chat box? Could you put in all your questions and answers into a system like that and emulate your chatbot situation?
It's on. Sorry. We have a similar one at UMass Amherst, and so yes, it is. Well, at least ours is. You can make an agent where you can upload a database or your knowledge base, and then you can put the same type of prompt into it. So yes, absolutely. At my university, I've had a hard time in getting basically a direct URL to that, so it's hard to incorporate it or embed it into another site that's more user-facing. So it's great for me to play with, but I haven't had a lot of luck using it as a chatbot, if that makes sense.
Hi, thank you so much for this informative panel. I have a question for Sean, but if all the panelists have a perspective, I'd love to hear it. When it comes to automating your processes, did you have to change or implement new quality assurance methods to make sure that the automation is functioning the way it's supposed to?
Not really. I mean, to start off, it's literally just taking exactly what I was doing manually and just automating it. So whatever I was doing previously, if it was working, then it just copied that and followed that. So no, I didn't really have to change anything with what I showed you. Like I said, that first iteration of that was just literally, what am I doing manually? I want to automate that, period. I didn't change anything. Since then, I've iterated to something different, but based on that, no, I just exactly what it was. It was just faster.
So my follow-up on that was there any need to double check the code, basically, if the software did an auto update or your security system for your institution did some kind of update? Because I know for our systems, that's always like a brace for impact day when anything gets updated and we have to double check.
So the nice thing about it is that the automation, it just runs. Like, you don't have to worry about that with the automation part. The only thing that would come into play there would be the website hosting, the VM that I'm running at the institution. I've had cases where they've updated something on their side and it's crashed the site, right? So that's really the only concern that I have. Everything else just runs off on the server. So as long as that server's running, everything's fine. So it's really just, honestly, it's IT that's been the problem. It's like, oh, sorry, we did an update. It's like, well, crashed my site. So it happens all the time.
And maybe I can answer from my chatbot perspective. That's definitely been kind of a major issue. So whether it was the LLM being updated or a new model rolled out, or an API that's used in the background, these things would always be problematic, and usually I wouldn't even notice it until some user would come and say, Jim, your chatbot's not working, and I'd be like, oh no. So with the local one, now I have full control over it. Granted, it's definitely not as powerful as the bigger ones, but I'm not asking it rocket science, right? These are just give the user the right answer from this small database. So they're pretty low weight.
Thank you very much.
So this is actually an ethics question, kind of totally opinion-based. I am curious about your thoughts on the ethics around transcription and summarization AIs in the context both in virtual meetings like Zooms and such, but also in the context of in-person meetings and wearables that are potentially gathering people that they may not know you're being recorded.
As far as recording in meetings, I've never, well, I guess I might not know, but I think everyone is made aware before the meeting and you click a thing saying, okay, I think it's built in now to all of the tools that I'm familiar with. So I think as long as everyone's made aware that they're being recorded, and we've used it for a task force that I'm on for ABRF, and it's given pretty good minutes for those. So I would be open to using it, and I don't really see a problem with it.
I think that's a great question. I mean, obviously we need to be talking about that. That's important, having these discussions. We're clearly not going to solve it. We're not going to come up with that today. But my take on it, and I may have a, outside opinion, is just, I assume I'm being recorded every second of every day, wherever I go, whatever I do. I mean, in this day and age, you just don't know. I mean, if you're in a one-party state, it doesn't matter, right? So that's just kind of how I approach it. I don't know that that's the best way to approach it, but that's just kind of my mindset. So I just go about my day and try not to worry about it.
Thank you all very much for your examples. I am very naive and starting to use AI and do see the applications for cores, and all the examples you gave are very accessible, and that's exactly what I'm kind of trying to start to do for our facilities. But in being naive and starting, I enjoyed you showing your prompts, and they use sort of a conversational language. I forget who said it's like having a very good intern that you're talking to. And I find myself, when I'm typing in the prompt, wanting to say things like, could you please do this? And then afterwards, like, thank you, but could you modify it to do this? I'm curious about the language for the input for that, if that can conflate the problem or cause it to go other directions, or with scientific writing, I'm very used to using very direct, kind of short, succinct sort of language, and I just wonder what your experience is with maybe tone and sort of language type that you ask it to do tasks for you with.